Good afternoon, everyone. Like they say, you can take the girl out of New Zealand, but you cannot take New Zealand out of the girl. As much as I am a very proud expat Aussie living in Australia, I am still very much New Zealand expat living in Aussie. I'm still very much a All Black supporter, as you can see. And today what I thought I would create for all of us is I would create the most delicious no-bake chocolate cookies, and I'm calling them no-bake All Blacks because they are lovely and dark, really rich, but they are what is known as a complete protein. So the ingredients that we're going to be using today to make these incredibly easy, absolutely delicious no-bake All Blacks are really good because they're a high quality plant-based protein. So of course, like always, the recipe is gluten-free, it is also grain-free, it is dairy-free, it is sugar-free. There is a nut-free option for those who don't or can't consume nuts as well. And so this is kind of making it a pretty awesome little recipe. So calling it, like I said, no bake All Blacks, because in a couple of hours I'm going to be taking my boyfriend Mai, and we're off to watch the All Blacks play Argentina tonight here in Sydney, which is super exciting because we are so obviously far away from home with no real opportunity to get back home to visit family and friends. So it's so nice that we have our team playing here in Sydney tonight and we get to go along and watch it. So before then, I've got to make some cookies because I need something to eat at the game. Because we all know that, like, notoriously stadiums are not the best place to get healthy or even get good food most of the time. So I'll be taking some of these no bake All Blacks with me. Something to munch on as we are watching the game, along with my Australian Shiraz, because there's always a bit of red wine at the game that we can have as well. So come on down to my bench. Let's get into the recipe. It is a quick one. It is an easy one. And it's just going to be fabulous as well. So come on down to the bench. Oh, if I can get there. Oh, there we go. Oh, there you go. You can see. Yes, you can. As I said, quick and easy. No baking required whatsoever. 100% plant-based as well. I'm going to talk you through not just the ingredients, but also how good they are for us as well. So the first thing that you want to start with, I have in my little bowl here, I have 120 grams of nut butter. If you do not want to add nuts to this recipe, you can have a seed butter here, of course, seed butter of your choice, whether it be sesame seed like a tahini, or you could use sunflower seed butter, or you could use pumpkin seed butter that you make your own. You just literally put pumpkin seeds into a food processor and blend them until they resemble a butter like that. So I'm just using a mixture. I've got a little bit of almond butter in here, but there's also a few seeds in there as well that have just gone through there. So 120 grams, which is about 4.2 ounces. Now, depending on where you live in the world and also what state your butter is in, you might find that just gently heating it is just going to help to stir things through. So you can either pop in the microwave for 20-30 seconds, or if you need to, just put into a little pot, very gentle, because you just want to warm it up just so it is able to be spread throughout the rest of the ingredients. So that's the first one, nut or seed butter, 120 grams, 4.2 ounces. We are then going to be adding in a little bit of coconut oil. I'm using a extra virgin coconut oil, and better put my scales on so I get it right. And we're going to be adding 30 grams, which is 1 ounce. And you want melted coconut oil, just to show you how warm it is in Sydney today. It is melted straight, literally straight out of the jar. And this stuff is so soft, I'm not even going to have to melt. It literally is super soft. It's kind of like, I always use coconut oil as my measure of the seasons, and that's what's happening in Sydney today, is I'm pouring it straight out of the jar, which is great. So 30 grams of that goes in there. We are also going to be adding a little bit of sweetness. We're going to be adding a prebiotic, and that is in the way of our pure as inulin powder. So you want about 30 grams of inulin powder goes into this. And I was saying about 30 grams because you might find, depending on the sweetness of the butter or the nut that you choose, is that you might add a little bit less inulin, or you might need to add a little bit more. For example, something like a pumpkin seed butter can be a little bit more on the savory side, so you may find that you want to add just a little bit more inulin, but I'll leave that up to you. With my one, which is based, pretty much almonds that I have in here, 30 grams or 1 ounce seems to work really well. So give it a bit of a stir, and this is why you need to just warm that butter through, just ever so gently, just so it is able to get that inulin right through it. Just like that. And now we're going to add the chocolate part of it. And so far, what have we added? We've added just, we've added omega-3s, we've added MCT oil in the form of coconut oil. This is already, and of course, inulin becomes a prebiotic. It's going to feed our gut bacteria. We've also added fiber in the way of inulin, which means we are also going to be helping to move things through our body, which is really important. Hence why I name these after All Blacks. This is the ideal healthy treat, not just for athletes, but for anyone who is watching their weight or anyone who wants to, have a really high quality protein as a treat. So this is why I have named these No Bake All Blacks, because they are ideal, not just, as I was saying, for sports people, but for anyone who wants to get that good quality protein in them. So once that's kind of smooth, I'm going to be adding in, and I've got raw cacao. So once we start adding in the raw cacao, now we are adding in our antioxidants, or in the form of a polyphenol. Don't get your All Black top 30, Bridget. Got to work to the game tonight. So raw cacao, really high quality, quite bitter, of course, as we know. This is going to give us an awesome antioxidant hit. And you know that antioxidants are there to get rid of the free radicals. So they provide an environment in our body which is conducive to being well as opposed to being ill. So into here we're going to be adding 25 grams, which is just under an ounce, so about 1/8 of an ounce. So 25 grams of our raw cacao powder goes in there. Once again, let's give it a bit of a stir. Just mixing it through. Don't have to be too exact with this, because we are also going to get our hands involved very soon. So once that's kind of stirred through just a little bit, I'm going to move to a larger bowl, because I'm going to be adding the component that's kind of going to bring it all together. And that component that I'm adding next is what I have in this jar here. So this is, I'll show you, what is known as puffed buckwheat. So you know the original buckwheat, which are like little hard seeds. This has been air puffed. And what we now have here firstly, buckwheat is a complete protein. What that basically means is that buckwheat has all the 9 essential amino acids that it is required by our body to literally build muscle and to look after our body in so many amazing ways. Buckwheat is an incredible complete protein, really good for people who don't eat meat, obviously, because it's another complete protein is meat. If you don't eat meat, this is a great way to make sure you get good quality essential amino acids, all the protein in your body using buckwheat, because it is complete. So you can get this from your health food store, or you can get this from a good supermarket. If you can't find this, don't panic. You could also use oats, or you could also use quinoa flakes. So there are alternatives to this, but I'm going with the complete protein today. Quinoa flakes is also a complete protein, so you definitely go with the protein content there. But if you can't find those, so you can also use oats. Now I know you hardly ever see me using this, but this is the perfect example of when a cup actually works. So I'm going to be adding 2 cups of quinoa flakes. And if I were to measure that out, that only comes to about 20 grams of quinoa flakes, of buckwheat puffs, which is not very much. 20 grams gives you all that amount. If you were to do the same with oats, because you couldn't find it of the buckwheat, and you will use oats here, that would measure at about 160 grams. It's still the same volume, but it's a lot heavier. So quinoa flakes or buckwheat puffs, you want to add about 20 grams, which is 2 cups. Or if you're using oats, once again, 2 cups, which is around about 160 grams. So that's why I thought I'd just explain that. I mean, I know I don't normally use cups, but in this instance, it actually is really important to see that there's a difference in weight by volume. So once that is in there, we're going to scrape all this mixture in. So I'm going to just throw that all in. And then, of course, I don't want to waste any, so I'm going to use my spatula, scrape the spoon clean. And I'm also going to scrape the bowl clean as well. And the last ingredient we're going to be adding, once we have made sure, we've ensured that the bowl is lovely and clean, so we don't want to waste any of that wonderful nut butter. The last ingredient we're going to be adding here is a little bit of fiber syrup. This is going to help everything to bind as well. So you want about 3 tablespoons of our sweet as fiber syrup. 3 tablespoons. And then the best way to do this is to get out your gloves. Get out your gloves. Put on some gloves. You could use a spoon, but I honestly have found, after doing this now quite a few times, that the best way is to get involved with your hands. If you don't have gloves, obviously give them a really good clean before and after, because you will make a mess. So this is the best way to do it. And then we're just going to go in with our gloved hand and give everything a bit of a squish. So whether you're using oats, whether you're using quinoa flakes, or as I'm doing here with the buckwheat puffs, this is the best way to make sure everything is mixed really, really well, really thoroughly, and you get that opportunity to give everything a bit of a squish. Now this recipe, by the way, makes enough for about 12 cookies, so it does go really, really far. If you like it to be a little bit darker, a little bit more richer, then you can do what I'm about to do now, is just to add a little bit more of that cacao. But if you're making this for kids, just be aware that obviously cacao is very bitter and they might look at you like, what are you trying to feed me? So if you're making this for the younger ones, you may want to just go gently on the cacao. If this is for you and you like a good dark bitter chocolate, then go for it. And I absolutely do like it to be lovely and dark. So nice mix made. All we need to do now is to mold them. And so you're looking for, and they come out such a cool size, right? You're looking for about a golf ball size of mixture. And then I have been known to be quite pedantic about shaping them into cookies. I can spend a lot of time, and it's best to give them a bit of a squeeze because then they hold together really well. Like I'm really giving them a decent squeeze. And then onto your board, and you flatten, and as you flatten, you kind of begin to mold the edges like this, and then you flatten a bit more, and you mold the edges. And like I said, I have been known to be extremely pedantic about making these cookies because I want them to look like cookies, but you don't have to be as careful as me. How much time do you have, right? If you want to, be pedantic and, you know, roll and flatten, and then you get like a really great shaped cookie, as you can see. Great shape. Or if you're just like, it all tastes the same when it's coming out the other end. But you might just want to do that. And it becomes more like a ball. That's okay as well. So I see that someone has asked, is using oats, will it work with whole oats? Oh, absolutely, Denise. It will work with whole oats. It will work with quick oats, which is basically just whole oats broken down. They don't add anything to it. They just make the oats smaller so they cook faster when you're making like a porridge. So yep, whole oats will work absolutely fine. And of course, as we know, whole oats are gluten-free. So by nature, oats are gluten-free. The only time that there may be an issue for people when it comes to gluten and oats is if you are highly gluten sensitive, so you are celiac, and the oats that you are consuming have been processed in the same factory as wheat products. There can be some very minute contamination of gluten, not enough for someone like myself who's gluten intolerant, but not heavily. I would never notice in oats. So I can eat oats quite happily, knowing that they're gluten-free. And oats, of course, are really good because they are a slow release energy. So rather than giving you massive spike of glucose and carbs, they actually release that energy slowly, and they're cheap as chips, and they're everywhere. Whereas you may struggle to find the the puffs here, the buckwheat puffs. You may struggle to find the quinoa flakes as well. But if you do, then there's nothing wrong with a good oat, and the oats taste really delicious as well. They all taste delicious. Doesn't matter what sort of puff you decide to add in there, or oat, it still tastes really good. So you can see I could literally be here forever, and just 20 grams of this stuff makes you 12 cookies. It stretches so far. It is so awesome. So at this point in time, I would suggest that you would leave these in the fridge, and you leave them in the fridge for around about half an hour, just to firm up a little bit. In fact, the best way to store them is to store them in the refrigerator in an airtight container. They'll last, they will happily sit in there for up to a couple of weeks, 2 weeks. They also freeze really well, so you can freeze them for up to 3 months. And when you're ready to, defrost a batch or defrost a few, the best way to do that is to leave them in the fridge overnight to defrost slowly, and then you've got your no-bake All Blacks ready to go for you as the very next morning, which is great. So let me take my gloves off. I have a whole tray. I've got to take so many of these to the game. I've got these ones, I got these ones that I'm still going to make, but I just wanted to show you what they taste like, sort of show you kind of what they taste like. They are really quite nice and firm now. So these have been in the fridge for about an hour, but you only need about half an hour. But they're a lot of fun, and you can see decent size too, not this little wimpy little cookie. This is like, I've got a cookie, and I didn't have to bake it, which is really quite amazing. So how do they taste? They are so much fun to eat, because the puffs are kind of like exploding a little bit in my mouth. But what I really like about these is that lovely richness from the cocoa powder just comes through so well. This is going to be perfect at the game tonight with my glass of Shiraz. Chocolate and red wine. Couldn't be better, right? So there you go, guys. A wonderful, easy, versatile, incredibly healthy recipe for you. Remember, if you're using quinoa or if you're using buckwheat, you are now making a complete protein cookie. So remember what a complete protein is? It's something that has all the essential 9 amino acids in it, which means that think of protein like the building blocks for your body. For every process that happens in your body, you need protein. And this is a great plant-based way to get protein into your body. So it's very cool. So thank you for joining me today. Do we have any questions, Mahi?
The question was...
Well, we do have a question. I can have another bite. My happy dance.
If oats want to work with whole oats.
Oh, I answered that already. Okay. I have answered. That was just about the oats. Oat question. Yes, you can use oats. You can use whole oats. You can use, and as well as, here's a little thing for you. Yes, you can get buckwheat puffs. So I want to show you what, in case you don't know what the original buckwheat looks like the raw buckwheat. Give me a second. I'm going to go grab my jar of buckwheat. I want to show you guys what it starts out as. Remember, buckwheat is not wheat. Really important. Buckwheat is not wheat. Buckwheat is the seed from a fruit plant, actually. And it's the seed that is eaten. And if you're wondering, if you're unfamiliar with buckwheat, you may have heard of soba noodles, which is the Japanese buckwheat noodles. That's what they use to make soba. And also very popular in some countries is buckwheat flour that is then made into buckwheat pancakes. So it is quite a common gluten-free flour that is used, but it starts off life looking like these tiny little seeds that you can see. They're absolutely tiny. And that buckwheat you can actually eat just like that. You can eat that raw. I often put buckwheat raw like that because it's crunchy. It's so wonderful. I put it into my own special muesli that I make, my muesli version. I also put it into, sprinkle it through melted chocolate when I make little nut bars. But one of my favorite ways just to have raw buckwheat, because remember it's a complete protein, is when I'm having my almond porridge, I will actually sprinkle buckwheat on top of it, just raw like that, because not only is it a complete protein, but then it has a wonderful crunchy texture to it. So that's what it starts off like that, buckwheat. I found another one. And then they air puff it, and it looks like puff wheat. But of course, buckwheat is not wheat. It is a seed. It's not a grain either. It's not a grain. And it is incredibly good for us. So buckwheat, complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids. But the other thing about buckwheat, once it's been cooked and cooled, which is what this stuff is here, once it's been cooked and cooled, it is also becomes what is known as a resistant starch. So basically what happens when you eat this puffed buckwheat, because it's been cooked, it's been heated, it popped, and then it cooled down, and now it's a resistant starch. So what happens when you eat a resistant starch is that it resists being digested in your stomach, it resists being digested in your small intestine, which is where a lot of the digestion happens, and it actually goes almost virtually untouched into your large intestine. And because it's gone in there untouched, it becomes food for your probiotics, which is your healthy gut bacteria. So when you eat a resistant starch, you are feeding your healthy gut bacteria. I mean, how cool is that? That something like this will actually be looking after the bacteria that call you home, which is really, really cool. And the other thing about resistant starch is it won't spike your blood glucose, it won't raise your insulin levels, so it is ideal for weight loss. It is ideal for people who are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, because it won't do all those nasty things that some other starches and carbs will do to your body. So it is a very cool thing, our buckwheat. If you, like I said, go and have a look for it, ask in your store, ask in your health food store. If you are still unsure, probably the best place to start is to let your fingers do the walking and to have a little look on Google to see if there is any puffed buckwheat or quinoa flakes near you, because don't forget, quinoa flakes are also a resistant starch as well. Complete protein, just wonderful plant-based foods that we can be including into our diet that just happen to taste really, really good. So thank you for joining me again. It's been wonderful and my absolute pleasure to spend this early start of the afternoon with you. I have to go and get ready. I've got a couple of one-on-one sessions coming up very shortly, and then it's off to watch some rugby with my boyfriend. I look forward to seeing you guys soon. If you're joining us in the 28-day boost camp, we have only 1.5 days till we start. So enjoy your weekend, and I will see you guys all who are on the boost on our Zoom on Monday night. All right, guys, take care. Have a good one, and go the All Blacks.